So, hi everyone, and welcome to the First and Last Word Poetry series. And Harris and I are so happy to see so many familiar faces tonight. It's good to see you all here. And our first reader is Elizabeth Lund. She's the author of Unsilenced from Barbara Press, and this is it. And she is an award-winning host of Poetic Lines, which features in-depth interviews with established and emerging poets. She also reviews poetry for major publications, including the Christian Science Monitor, where she edited poetry for 10 years. From 2015 through 2019, she wrote a monthly poetry column for the Washington Post. Her own poems have appeared in the US, the UK, and Canada. And I give you Elizabeth.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you, everyone. Poems in Unsilenced deal with domestic violence, and that's a subject I never intended to write about, didn't want to write about. But in 2011, my beloved aunt was shot and killed by her husband of 40-something years. And after her passing, like many of my family members, I struggled with questions and anger and grief. And a few months later, I wrote one poem that was in response to some of the negative news stories I had seen, some of which tried to make my aunt sound like she had been the aggressor, which was not the case at all. This is called Auntie. When police arrived, she hovered just beneath the ceiling, her oh and no struggling to rise. I don't believe she taunted him, waving an apron as if at a bull. Old man, you can't even shoot straight. 46 years they had teetered at the edge of a precipice. Did silence scream one last time, nagging the spouse neither wanted nor loved? Or did she slump as he wavered, his oh so soft and hideous that only their tabby in the rafters had any chance to survive? Everyone in the family had to deal with grief. I think one of the youngest members probably found that the most difficult to deal with, especially since this little guy had tried to protect my aunt a few weeks before she died. Where'd Gummy go? The 3-year-old asked. Gummy, where'd she go? He thinks she stands on the edge of a cloud, poised to dive back down. How do you say, never coming back? Weeks after he raised clenched fists, shouting, leave my Gummy alone. Sometimes she was too tired to pray. Help me, I'm afraid. Other thoughts rose. She pulled each one down like a balloon on a string. Just go. You can leave. Please pick up the phone. Refrain. The family removed all of his guns, thought they'd removed all his guns. All the weapons removed, they thought. All weapons the family removed. All but one, the newspaper said. All but one. My aunt loved cats, and when I was growing up, she almost always had 6 at a time. She had this amazing ability to find strays that needed love, or maybe they found her. As I was writing the poems, I had my own cat experience that I immediately thought of her. At the animal park, Route 13. Put your finger in her mouth. That always makes her smile. 8 weeks old, coat thick as a lamb's, she gnaws my thumb, dry, useless nipple. Muscles coil as she pulls my wrist closer, muse to her mother, aunts, guardians, generations of wingless lamassu. She doesn't know her power yet. Hold that pose, hold it. Years ago, 3 others stood watch over a girl, raped, bloody, beaten. I picture them now, circling my aunt, standing between her and my uncle. Females do most of the hunting, you know. What are you looking for? The cub squirms and growls, hind legs practicing grandmother steps, silent, tiny, stealthy. Miles from my pride, I feel my thighs tighten, as if I'm hunched by a water hole, waiting. Want another photo? You may never cuddle a lion again. Victim to victor, holder to held. Give me this moment, whatever the cost, where the predator shakes, hunted. When I was writing the poems, there were times when I could hear my aunt's voice, as if there were something she wanted to convey. This poem is in 3 parts. Visitations. 1. A lamp's fine light in my hair on the table. I cannot raise my head, even hear a numb hum. Now I am ready for the sound of milk on a white cat's tongue, a woodchuck's long sleep, thinning clouds, stones in a brook are a single chorused note until she speaks. Where am I? Did I drown? Why does that man keep holding me down? 2. 2 nights later, she reappears, walking on ice 3 feet thick. I have come to find that numbing sting that tethers me to this life. She kneels by a fishing hole, the water beyond reach. Like my daughter's hand when I went under, holding only the sound of her heart, a frayed, invisible rope. 3. I see circles everywhere, she says, though I walk in straight lines. Daffodils skirt an oak tree 8 rings thick, the hem of an angel's robe. Yards away, children toss a ball painted like the earth. It sails over one boy's head. Another boy lifts the globe high and smiles as she turns round and round, trying to catch her shadow. Owls appear throughout the book, and they say things that people don't know or maybe don't want to recognize. But in one poem, the owls are trying to figure out which side they stand on, and ultimately the speaker has to figure out which side she wants as well. 2 owls in conversation. Like Minerva, she tried to love them both, arguing in the trees. This is my home, called the first. I own these hills and fields. The second defended stolen turf. Your world belongs to me. Birches, pines slowly bent, seduction filling the dark. She and I will soar all night. No, she will hide with me. The 2 debated like philosophers still trapped in that old cave. Shadows are my reality. Mine is a cloudless sky. One voice crept, the other soared, each suitor hooting his say. When did she learn that one must choose? How did she decide? One of my favorite poems in the book is called Underwater, and that's why my background looks like I am underwater. The poem that I'm about to read was recently featured in the Washington Post book club. Underwater. The challenge was easy then. Dive off the boat at high tide, swim down, down till you touch the white sand, then translate the messages signaled from above. I remember sitting on the bottom, watching the greenish sun wobble or trade one shape for another until the sky became a watercolor map only my cousin and I could decipher. Each wave made the thin paint shimmer, another wash of light rippling across the canvas. Nothing looked the way it should, and sounds like poorly aimed arrows deflected off the surface. Yet when she leaned over the side of the boat, arms waving like seaweed, I knew what she meant. Stay there. Go this way. I'm the queen. We didn't need words, not when an invisible chain ran from boat to sand, a family secret that flowed through our veins, an ancient script tattooed on our fingers long before we were born. Soon enough, my lungs would burn and I'd kick toward the surface, reclaiming the world of sound. Salt never stung, as I recall, until I broke through the swells. The sky is mine. I own the sun. Hold your breath. Hold it. We understood metaphor then. My voice feels like it's starting to go, so I'm going to read one more poem. And this poem closes the book, and I want to share it because it gives my aunt back her voice. Her last words. I wasn't afraid as I rose above the room, my house, the tree line. 2 pairs of wings soared with me, a slow velvet shimmer. Going home, they sang. Wasn't I just there? A field of feathers below bloomed gold, brown, white, to catch me if I faltered. Above, a trap door, tightly sealed. To enter, you must leave it all. Every sound scattered then, like prey evading a raptor. I heard myself clearly say, time to rise above this life, sever all phantom pain. Thank you.
That was quite very moving and very poignant, very very personal, I guess is the only way to describe it. It was powerful. I think powerful is a very good word, I think. Thank you, then. Thank you, Elizabeth. Our next featured poet tonight is January Gill O'Neil. She is an associate professor at Salem State University and the author of Glitter Road, which is forthcoming in 2024, Rewilding, 2018, Misery Islands, 2014, and Underlife, 2009. All of these have been published by CavanKerry Press. From 2012 to 2016, she was the executive director of the Massachusetts Poetry Festival, the recipient of fellowships from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, Canem, and the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund. She currently serves as the 2022-2023 board chair of the AWP. Please welcome January Gill O'Neil.
Thanks, Harris. Thanks, Gloria. Elizabeth, what a wonderful reading. Congratulations on your book. And powerful is an excellent word to describe your work. Thank you. I want to give a shout out. I invited some of my students to join us. So, so they're here. So thanks for coming. Yeah, so I'm going to read poems from just all over, and I'll probably end, I think I'll end with some new ones from my book, Literate, which will come out next year. So, let's see. In the company of women, make me laugh over coffee. Make it a double. Make it frothy so it seethes in our delight. Make my cup overflow with your small happiness. I want to hoot and snort and cackle and chuckle. Let your laughter fill me like a bell. Let me listen to your ringing and singing as Billie Holiday croons above our heads. Sorry, the blues are nowhere to be found. Not tonight, not here. No makeup, no tears. Only contours. Only curves. Each sip takes back 1 pound. Each dry roasted swirl takes our soul. Can I have another? Just one more? Let the bitterness sink to the bottom of our lives. Let us take this joy to go. So I've been thinking about spring and thankful that we have seemed to missed major snowstorms this year, knock on wood. How to love. After stepping into the world again, there is that question of how to love, how to bundle yourself against the frosted morning, the crunch of icy grass underfoot, the scrape of cold wipers along the windshield, and convert time into distance. What song to sing down an empty road as you begin your morning commute? And is there enough in you to see, really see the 3 wild turkeys crossing the street with their featherless heads and stilt-like legs in search of a morning meal? Nothing to do but hunker down, wait for them to safely cross. As they amble away, you wonder if they want to be startled back into this world. Maybe you do too, waiting for all this to give way to love itself, to look into the eyes of another and feel something, the pleasure of a new lover in the unbroken night, your wings folded around him. On the other side of this ragged January, as if a long sleep has ended. So I live, most of you know, I live in Beverly, Massachusetts, and we used to have this great roller skating place that I loved because when the kids were younger, I couldn't go dancing. So I could take them skating, and that was just enough. So this is my ode to a place that's no longer with us. Night at the Roller Palace. After the birthday crowds thin out, after the hokey pokey and chicken dance, after the parents have towed their shaky kids like cabooses, ready to decouple, and their pint-sized skaters have circled the rink like a gang of meerkats, spun into a 10-car pileup, you turn sideways and angle by as another one bites the dust, thumps overhead. You give a finger point to the DJ stand because in your mind, we are soldiers in this march against time, grooving to the retro beat while the disco ball shines overhead, cut crystal against rainbow walls. You guide like Mercury or Apollo Ono without wings or skin suit, in lowrider jeans that hug your body like you hug corners, past them all on the smoothed out parquet floor, worn down by time and rhythm. The trick is to make it look effortless. Remind them that your quickness is a kind of love. You are the spark between wood and wheel. And when your cranky kids hang out by the wall ready to go, holding those 8 wheels by their brown leather tongues, you give them a wave and keep circling. Just one more song, you say. This is your me time. It's all skate. You've got your whole self in. That's what it's all about. So my son is now at Syracuse. I can't believe it. He's 19, but he was 13 when I wrote this poem. Hoodie. A gray hoodie will not protect my son from rain, from the New England cold. I see the partial eclipse of his face as his head sinks into the half-dark and shades his eyes. Even in our quiet suburb with its unlocked doors, I fear for his safety. The darkest child on our street in the empire of blocks. Sometimes I do not know who he is anymore, traveling the back roads between boy and man. He strides a deep stride, pounds a basketball into wet pavement. Will he take his shot, or is he waiting for the open mouth, orange rim to take a chance on him? I sing his name to the night, ask for safe passage from this borrowed body into the next, and wonder who could mistake him for anything but good. You know, I read that poem now and I feel as strongly as I did when I wrote it. You just never know, and you're always concerned for your kids. Let's see. Even though we have a newish first lady in the White House, there was a time that people used to think I looked like Michelle Obama, which I don't see it, but here we are. On being told I look like FLOTUS, New Year's Eve party 2014. Deep in my biceps, I know it's a compliment, just as I know this is an all Black people look-alike moment. So I use the minimal amount of muscles to crack a smile. All night, he catches sight of me or someone like me, standing next to the deconstructed cannoli and empty bottles of Prosecco. And in that moment, I understand how little right any of us have to be whoever we are. The constant tension of making our way in this world on hope and change. You're working your muscles to the point of failure, Michelle Obama once said about her workout regimen. But she knows we wear our history in our darkness, in our patience. A compliment is a compliment, this I know. Just as the clock will always strike midnight and history repeats. This is how I can wake up the next morning and love the world again. So I'm going to read a few new poems from my book, Glitter Road. So in 2019-2020, I received a fellowship to the University of Mississippi, also known as Old Miss, and I took my teenagers and we moved down, and you know, it was an interesting, amazing time. I mean, Mississippi is exactly what you think it might be like, and it is nothing what you think it might be like. So, I'm going back and forth on which poems to read. Since we've been watching a little bit in the news, you know, trying to see what's going on with, you know, some indictments that may or may not come down. I was thinking about this poem. I visit Mississippi often. And so I wrote this poem right after the January 6th riots. Driving through Mississippi after the Capitol Hill riot, January 9th, 2021. And when that country dog blocked the car, snarling, put his body in front of the front tire, it stopped us from passing on an otherwise quiet afternoon. The winter grass, a pale yellow, new brick houses, threading through a 2-lane road on our way to someplace else. That dog, maybe a feist or a red heeler, coat of dark amber, rust dog, all bite, all bark, unchained, perhaps for the first time today, would not be moved. America, haven't we been here before, standing our ground in failing light, our breaths held, not knowing what will happen next? The texture of this moment turning so hard, so fast. That dog flushed with adrenaline and a loud echoing bark, teeth clenched towards whatever comes down the road. And so we learned a lot about Emmett Till while we were down there and the legacy of Emmett Till, mainly because, well, you can't really avoid it, but when we were down there, there were 3 Ole Miss students that shot up the marker where Emmett Till was pulled out of the water. Emmett Till being a 14-year-old boy back in 1955 who was accused of whistling at a white woman. He was beaten, shot, thrown into the Tallahatchie River with a 75-pound cotton gin fan wrapped around his throat. And so my daughter and I went to the rededication ceremony. At the rededication of the Emmett Till Memorial, Glendora, Mississippi, October 9th, 2019. He was 14, same age as my daughter who sits beside me on the crowded bus. We travel with police escort, like a funeral procession, to dedicate the new marker at Graball Landing. Along the dirt road, red spider lilies bloom around the gnarled roots of aged oaks. Life grows on among the silent brown branches. Delta dust settles to reveal cotton fields ready for harvest. There have been signs before, 3, stolen, shot up, tossed in the river. The last one stood just 35 days, riddled with bullets again and again, refusing us the comfort of leaving the past in the past. Till's story requires hardened steel. This marker weighs 500 pounds. It is black, bulletproof, designed to absorb rifle rounds of white supremacy. And my heart curves around the side of this road, reconciling that old hurt with a new resolve. Every time it's taken down, it is going back up. On the Tallahatchie's bank, we honor, we grieve, let our feet sink into the mud while the brown water rages. And I will, let's see, I will end with this one. Regret nothing. If at 4 a.m. you find yourself awake and alone, curled up in your half-empty bed under a flashlight's white light, reading a poem, little moon casting its aura across the page, regret nothing. Not the clothes piled in the corner, not the drawers closed like caskets, the unpacked lunches, the bedtime story trapped in its book, the child's glove under the couch, missing the body it protects. All that must be swept, bundled, and carried off to somewhere else, only to return to the source of your making. Regret nothing. Even as a glimmer of yourself catches you in the mirror like a stranger, walk into the day with your whole heart intact. Walk into the center of everything. Leave nothing in your wake. Thank you.
Thank you, January. It was lovely to hear your series of poems there. And there were only poems that you can write, and they were quite marvelous. Thank you very much. Our third feature has John Skoyles has published 7 books of poems and 5 of prose. His latest book of poems is Yes and No. His work has appeared in the New Yorker, the New York Times, Poetry, the Paris Review, among others. He is the well-known poetry editor of Ploughshares, one of the top literary journals in the country. I give you John Skoyles.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Harris, and thank you, Gloria, for inviting me. It's a pleasure tonight to read with Elizabeth in January. Thank you for those readings. I'm going to read a mixture of poems from my latest book that came out called Yes and No. It came out about 1.5 years ago, and then some new poems as well. The first poem I'm going to read is, I read a poem, the first poem in Paul Muldoon's book, Frolic and Detour. It tickled me because it was about his first memory. And the first line is, the first thing I remember is being kicked by a horse. And it's a funny poem. So anyway, I wrote a poem with the same rhyme scheme. And his is called The Great Horse of the World, and mine is called The Great Deviled Eggs of the World. The first thing I recall is a falling tray of deviled eggs when I opened the refrigerator door, splashing my shirt, shorts, and legs before it hit the floor, leaving my mother in her bridge club, just the dregs. The uproar was so great, I can still see the runny mess that even the most imaginative hen could not anticipate. And the eggs, no longer oval with loneliness, embraced the boy about to taste the condiments of fate. And when I was thinking of what I was going to read tonight, I thought I'll read a kind of a silly poem about food as well, called, and also a formal poem. I don't usually write rhymed poems, but this one seemed to beckon it, and it's called At the Stop and Shop. A hand behind me taps my arm to show 2 mushrooms on an open palm. I allow him to jump ahead, and when he leaves, the cashier rolls her eyes and grieves that in her bones she feels that soon she'll meet a man with 1 mushroom. Could only happen in Provincetown. I said, why are you just buying 2 mushrooms? He said, I read that they're good for you if you put them in a smoothie. I said, why don't you just eat them? I'm going to read a poem called The Heart Has Reasons. Not an original title. The heart has reasons, and I wrote those reasons on the ruled grid of an index card to preserve the moment, madam, when the panels of the hotel elevator closed, leaving just us. A sigh and a kiss did nicely, lady, but when the doors opened again, you were again nowhere near. And now the file card's lost too, with its logical, numerical slate. I've misplaced this and that over the years, dear, but the things I most miss are listed on that card. And another poem I'd like to read, a kind of, you could call it a love poem late in life. And it's called Last Things First. The one who makes you laugh is the one who'll make you cry, my mother used to say to me. But let's not waste time critiquing matters of the heart, and instead try the door to my often stalling car and hope the engine starts. Give me a push and climb along the running board. The avenue is full of danger, fear, and joy. We pass a boy swinging a basket toward the sky, headed toward a cliff he might not see. Why should he? Whether he finds a ledge or a cloud, he's free. We've missed the overture, the aria, but the encore is all we need. No more fiddling for the condo key or anxious heading toward the bedroom door. We'll just wake up at dawn. We've paid our dues on time, stood in line and signed our names. We've put first things first and been in accord with the sumptuary laws. Now let's reject the order of the day, throw it in reverse from Z to A. Give me a shove and leap after me. The poem I'd like to read about a poet that a lot of you knew, I think, Bill Knott. We've lost so many wonderful poets in the last few years: Tony Hoagland, Richard McCann, Tom Lux, Dennis Johnson. It's been a terrible time, the loss of poetry and friends. And Bill worked at Emerson with me for years, but I knew him years before that because when I was in graduate school, I wrote my MFA thesis on his books. He only had 2 books out at that time. I published that essay in Granite magazine. I don't know if you remember that, from New Hampshire. It was a small magazine that got in trouble with the NEA for taking money, and then they published a poem about a dead cat or something, and it caused an uproar, I remember. But Bill was very appreciative of that essay because he'd only had, I think, 2 or 3 books out then. And I knew him right up to his death. And so this one is Bill Knott, 1940-2014. I'm writing this in purple ink, as was his wont, a phrase that would have put him in stitches. Another cliche he'd scorn less than gently. I miss my friend, whose absence could fill a room with stories from those whose lives he touched and tortured, like the kid who dropped his class rather than risk another book on scansion flung at his head. When my son was sick, Bill wrote, "If I believed in God, I'd pray, but since I don't, here's something to help." Not cashing the check made him angry, but stormy feelings were his domain, remnants of the orphanage and army. He changed the name of his collected tome on Amazon every day, settling for dropping Sylvia Plath on Hiroshima and other poems. An unlikely ladies' man, lavender ink often leaking down his shirt. Let's leave him where I saw him last, on a bed in a Mass Ave mattress firm, sitting beside a gorgeous novelist, both of them bouncing and testing, collapsing and laughing, then resting. This is a new poem I wrote with a refrain. I don't often write poems with a refrain, but I thought I'd try it, and well, you can hear it. It's called 3 Wishes. A frog along the clamshell path provides 3 wishes and a rash. Fall from a great height or never fall. On the palms of my outstretched hand, a kind of welcome, male to man. Fall from a great height or not at all. I dreamt I proposed in a hurricane and knelt for a marriage that never came. Fall from a great height or never fall. The frog must be Sigmund's son. He counts that dream as number 1. Fall from a great height or not at all. We settled in for our nightly fix of cartoon buffoons in politics, WBGO from the radio on the sill, and a puppy tamed of its free will. Fall from a great height or never fall. I wanted you to take my name. My frog friend says he's not to blame for claiming that as number 2. I make a list of my lives with you and remember most the lightning kiss we risked by hugging on the beach in rain as Frankie Dash sang, "You've changed." Fall from a great height or not at all. Your face in summer on a pillow, a candle and its flicker signal the feverish fulfillment of a final wish. Fall from a great height or never fall. Oh, here's a strange poem. I had a girlfriend years ago who was a fortune teller, and this poem is called Sheila Who Sees. Sheila Who Sees. I asked her one day, and she said, "Why not?" The tarot showed us something we both had forgotten. Face up, face down, over and around. It was then, it was never, it was already, and it was pleasure. Sheila Who Sees told fortunes on an ironing board, swiftly turning cards and sending clients home, wary of the beyond. She could see into the distance where streetlights edged the window frame, and on that ledge, a music box cat sang a song with my name in it. An evening star crashed right through the plate glass of the living room where I loved Sheila and Sheila loved the moon. And I'm going to read to close with a longish poem, not that long, but long for me, a couple of pages that I wrote before the pandemic, but right before it. And when I wrote it, I thought everyone's going to think that I was referring to us wearing masks, but it came right before that. And it's called Prayer at the Masked Ball. Be my God, if you don't mind being asked. And if you don't mind being asked to dance at this masked ball, allow me to introduce myself. I've worn this face since birth, and now I want it off. I need a God to remake me, not in his image, but in the shape of boys I asked to be. The cresting wave-like pompadour of Johnny Villar, Terence Kelly's stiff upper lip, the name alone of Artie Robb. If you do become my God, let the chandelier's refracted constellations strut across each dancer's mask, those romantic glances of cut crystal, giving us our best chance of living life as someone else. Replace my skin with a pelt from smelted ore. I'm tired of flinching from a score of imagined hurts. You always were and always will be. You have an infinite future and a past just as long. And as you glide across the ballroom floor, lift your disguise and show me who you are. I'm not asking you to be the God of a saint, just of a minor sinner. And really, who have I ever heard? Yes, but long ago. Be my God, and let me recall the good days in our home, not the drama of gin before dinner and brandy later, where hour after hour the bear went over the mountain, only to find another mountain. I don't need a large part of you, just that corner that loves puns, a kind of school crossing god, the jester who invented sex, the magician who pulls a man out of a boy and a new man out of him. My God, good God, God forbid God asked to damn everything on earth, the lost ring, shut store, script screw, and missing oar. All who walk on 2 legs, 4, with tail or without, employ wings, slide on stomachs, swim. God asked to bless everything we eat, and both sides of warring nation beasts. God, on whose knee I will sit in heaven, please be my God before the certain curtain call. I know I've created you, and I know it's the other way around. But since these are only pleas on a page, don't punish me too harshly for being, in a manner of speaking, your God. I made you to remake me, and then take me to someone who will love me, if it's possible, to love a man in a mask who asks God to dance at the masked ball. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Those poems were serious, but with a reflecting an undercurrent of humor in many of them. I couldn't help but smile, at the twists and turns of some of your poetry there. And you set a very high bar for people who would dare to submit to your journal.
Jeez, please. Thank you, Harris.
No, I think, it was very, very enjoyable, very entertaining, and very, in some places, quite profound. So thank you very much. Gloria? Gloria,
Yes. Yeah, I'm here. Anyway, what a wonderful evening of such great readings. Wow, I am so floored. But now we come to the Q&A section of our night. And does anyone have any questions for our readers? You can raise your hand. Yes, Lloyd.
I wanted to, first of all, wonderful reading, everyone. And so interesting, so different from one another. And what a pleasure. But I couldn't leave tonight without asking Elizabeth to talk about her book cover, because I think it's a very extraordinary cover. And I was just wondering about the choice and the story behind it.
Thank you for that question, Lloyd.
Oh, you're welcome.
So when Gloria and I were working on the book, she looked for images that might make good book covers. And she sent me the image that is on the book. And my first reaction was, oh, wow, that's powerful. And then I thought, oh, the woman looks so sad. Will that deter people from reading the book or even flipping through the pages? And initially I thought, no, it's too unsettling a cover. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's the woman in that painting is the kind of woman that I hope will read these poems. Someone who feels isolated, trapped, and alone. If my poems can accomplish anything, what I hope they will do is to let a lot of women know that they don't have to be silenced or endangered. So I now love the cover because it does make people say, ooh, what is that about? And it sort of sets the tone for the poems. The book moves from darkness toward light, but it is not an easy subject. And I think the cover can pull people in, also give them a sense of the journey they're about to take. But as I said, my hope is that people will read those poems and say, oh, that sounds way too familiar. I need to rethink some things.
Works.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Anyone else? Don't be shy about asking a question. Oh, there we go. Lloyd, why don't you finish up, and then Tom, hi, it's good to see you. Then you can go after Lloyd.
Well, I was very interested in what January said about Mississippi and about it being exactly what you expected and not what you expected. And I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that.
Sure. Mississippi is a beautiful state. I think I was surprised at, how vast it is. It has 3 million people, which, it's not a heavily populated state at this point. And it's not all flat. And the Mississippi is just a vast expanse, and all the tributaries and lakes and rivers that flow from it. It's just amazing. But they have a history, and there's, when I think about the landscape, I think about trauma in the land, and I think about the legacy of slavery. And being from Virginia, it's not like I'm, I know what that legacy is, but to go down to the deep South, it was just a different perspective, and I had to confront things that I hadn't really thought about in a very long time. Even when I lived in Virginia, we stayed away from certain areas, and the area I lived in is a little more cosmopolitan than other areas. I don't know if you all know this, but Tom and I went to college together, so so I'm glad he came tonight. So anyway, yeah. So Mississippi is amazing. I mean, it is a lot of what that book deals with is learning about the Emmett Till legacy, and just the dealing with the Confederate flag, which finally came down in Mississippi, the bars and stars. But I also fell in love there. So it's an amazing, beautiful state. It is not all trauma. The people there are not, they're like everybody else. It's a mix of people across the country. So in some ways, I feel like they're a little more forward thinking and advanced about how they discuss race. But they still have a lot of laws that keep them stuck in their traditions, and they're still living with the legacy of slavery. So, yeah.
Should I go?
Jump right in.
Yes.
Okay. Well, listen, thanks for a wonderful reading, all of you. I want to specifically ask Jan. So one of the things that it's true, I have returned to Virginia. We did go to school together here at Old Dominion, and on the subject of race, Jan, I'd love to hear a little more. I'm teaching at Norfolk State now as well as ODU,
Okay.
and one of my favorite things I've ever done in my whole career is to teach at Norfolk State, and I gotta tell you, I feel crazy for not having been asked to do that before. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but it's a kind of a sacred thing, and HBCU is a kind of a sacred thing, I think, in this country, especially after the 16 to 2020 years. But I wanted to ask, and so weigh in any way you like. But I also wanted to ask all three of you. All three of you, in different ways, are wonderful, not just ideas poets, but musicians. Just lovely sonic poets. And can I ask about the process of composition, John, and of course Jan and Elizabeth? Do you ever find yourself sort of composing more initially, as I do, by sound, and then finding your way that, well, the words I'm saying and the sounds I like, I make these words because these words have these sounds, and they sort of go together nicely, and then find your way to a theme or an idea? Or do you typically start with an idea first and try and come up with words that say it?
I typically come up with ideas first, but sound is really important in my poems. And I often listen to music when I'm writing. Shockingly, I listen to words. I listen to songs with words, and but I need noise, ambient sounds to distract me, so I can just sort of focus and hone in. But rarely do I build a poem based on sound. I usually start out with an idea, and I might start from the title down, which may change, or I don't know exactly where the poem will end, but I usually know how I want it to start. And so that's usually how I build. But I will go in the revision process, really is kind of where the sound quality comes in for me. Just and reading it aloud and trying to fix it as I go along.
In other words, the opposite of the way I do it. The last thing I try and do is make them make sense. John, Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on that question?
I'll go then. If, I'm with you, Tom, on that. My method. I start with a phrase usually. It's a phrase or a sentence, and then it takes me wherever it goes. And then in revision, I go back and, as January said, you go back and you can see where there's weak lines. By that I mean lines that maybe there's no language that's interesting. Even I was thinking, even as I was reading the Bill Knott poem, which I just not really, still in process in some ways, I was thinking right beforehand that a better word, I can't remember where it was now, but I was thinking I found there was a better word I could use in that poem just to pick up the sound.
Yes.
And it would be it was a synonym, but it was a better word, So in revision, that's where I kind of infuse the music if I can. But I think that's something I need to work on in my work. I think it doesn't come easily to me.
Right.
As I said, I could hear the music that you picked up in the other two poets, which I was envying for the sonorous quality as they were reading. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
That's great. Thank you.
I think my process is very different from Jan's and John's because I usually start with an image. And oftentimes that image will be associated with a feeling, but as I'm writing and I'm trying to get the image on the page and I'm trying to convey the feeling that prompted the poem, that's when the music comes in. And often I'm not even aware of it. Someone told me that my collection is very musical, and I was surprised by that because I don't think of myself as being aware of music. But now that you asked that question, I realized that for me, music is related to feeling and to imagery. It's all combined. But I start with the image and then work through the music as I'm revising and writing the poem.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question before Harris closes us out. Who would like to go? Oh, Barbara, go ahead.
Unmute myself. John, I was wondering if you could tell me how you feel your writing over the years, how it's changed about what you write about and how you write. I was just curious about that.
Thank you for the question. It has changed over the years in that I think as I grew older, I became more aware of my weaknesses. And there's a wonderful essay by Greg Orr called The Four Temperaments. And he talks about, it's an anthology called Poets Teaching Poets, but it's probably in one of his books too, Greg Orr, ORR. And he talks about music, story. I can't remember the other two, but I remember he says the great poem should have those four temperaments, and it's a funny measure, which I still think about when I look back at some of my work. So I think it's changed. It's changed with my emotional life as I grew. I mean, the early poems were certainly apprentice work and adolescent concerns of broken hearts, and things like that. But tender hearts. As I grew, not that love poems can, I hope, be made until you die, but I think they grew hopefully more mature. And I think that my reading, what I learned from so many those behind me and in front of me, it never ended. So I hope that sort of infused my own work with whatever I can pick up from them. And that's why I like doing the magazine, because I learned so much from young people. So I don't know if that answers your question. But.
It does. Thank you. And I just wanted to say, I really liked the way you had humor that popped up here and there. It was delightful. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now, Harris, would you please close us out?
All right. I just want to say a huge thank you to quite a memorable evening of marvelous poetry. And I want to ask everybody to give a nice warm round of applause for our three featured poets, Elizabeth Lund, January Gill O'Neil, and John Skoyles.
Thanks, everyone. This was great. Thanks, Harris. Thanks, Gloria.
Thank you.